Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has announced that a deal has been arrived at between the US and Iran. A few minutes later, President Trump confirmed that they had arrived at a deal. And then a bit later, the Iranians, especially the Deputy Foreign Minister Gharib Abadi, also confirmed that they were going to sign a deal on Friday in Geneva. This would be a memorandum of understanding, an MOU. But the question is, what does this mean? The details are a bit fuzzy, and I'll try and get you what we know so far. And what does this actually mean in reality? Well, the bottom line is this war is not yet over. Because even though the next 4 days are going to see further negotiations, even this initial announcement that we have has a lot of ambiguity. The two sides are not corresponding to each other in the details, and the hardest part, that is the nuclear negotiations and sanctions relief, have been kicked down the road. Trump is claiming that Hormuz has now been opened and ships should traverse it, and that he will immediately be removing the blockade on Iran. Shehbaz Sharif and the Iranians are claiming that Lebanon is part of the deal. That is, all conflict will have to be stopped, including in Lebanon. That is, Israel's attacks on Hezbollah and vice versa are part of this deal. Speculation is that on Friday, $24 billion worth of Iran's frozen assets will also be released by the United States and the surrounding Arab and GCC countries. In fact, it's even being claimed that US forces will be withdrawn and some kind of a negotiated reconstruction plan for Iran for the damages it has suffered during this war, totaling more than 300 billion US dollars, will also be arranged. And that 60 days down the line, the final peace deal will be signed after nuclear negotiations and sanctions relief has been confirmed. In fact, it's being claimed that even as soon as by Friday, sanctions on Iranian export of oil will be temporarily lifted so that Iran can start exporting some oil. But friends, here are the issues. Hormuz is unlikely to open in the next few days or even in the coming weeks because there are possibly mines in the passageway which have to be removed. There is damaged infrastructure. And most importantly, insurance companies and shipping companies have to have the confidence that there will be no further attacks. Only then will they renew the insurance, and the shipping companies, when they'll will then give the go ahead to their ships to leave the Hormuz Strait laden with cargo, and empty ships will then be able to enter through Hormuz in order to reload. But there are other bigger problems. That is, Israel is not at all happy with this deal. Neither the people and population nor the politicians, they all think this is a very bad deal because none of the objectives with which Israel set out this war, and possibly even the US, have been achieved. That is, neither is Iran promised to stop supporting its proxies in Hezbollah, Houthis, or Hamas. Neither has Iran promised to limit its missiles, nor has there been regime change in Iran, and nor has the nuclear issue been resolved. So Israel is likely to be a spoiler now and in the foreseeable future. In fact, Israel tried to even stop this deal, that is, as late as yesterday, just a few hours before the deal. Israel bombed the outskirts of Beirut on Hezbollah bases and headquarters, and Iran was preparing its missiles to fire back at Israel because Beirut was a red line for Iran. But immediately, President Trump intervened. There was also a lot of diplomacy on the part of Pakistan and Qatar. And Trump announced that both sides should restrain themselves. In fact, he sweetened the deal for Iran because of this attack. He said that he would immediately remove the blockade rather than 30 days down the line, which he was earlier insisting on, and possibly has thrown in the temporary removal of oil sanctions on Iran as well. So Israel's attack may have hastened things and sweetened the deal for Iran rather than have the opposite effect. And that's why Iran has decided to quickly accept the deal as well. One can't even say quickly because the deal has been negotiated for weeks and weeks. And Iran knows that at any point it can stop the deal if there is any violation by itself closing down Hormuz. That is, closing down the Strait of Hormuz is now so easy for Iran that it can do that at a drop of a hat. That's possibly why Iran agreed to it, even though it has very low trust in US and Israel, even though there is a lot of opposition among the hardliners within Iran. In fact, Iranian TV, which is controlled by hardliners, kept criticizing the deal and showing protests against it. But the average Iranian is very happy with the deal because life has been miserable within Iran. There have been shortages of all kinds of food items because of the blockade, and Iran is unable to earn anything because It cannot export oil or earn any revenue. Moreover, a lot of critical infrastructure is destroyed, a lot of industrial base is destroyed, and because of it, a lot of people are unemployed. So, smarting because of economic difficulties and because Trump promised immediate relief, Iran has agreed to this deal with the caveat that it can shut down Hormuz whenever it wants. But the biggest difficulties will lie ahead. That is, what has been so far been negotiated is the easier part. The toughest problems will lie with the nuclear negotiations and the long term sanction relief for Iran. Here, there are five or six big problems. The biggest problem is trust. That is, Trump tore up a deal which Iran had spent years in negotiating and was complying with. That is the Obama era 2015 JCPOA deal. The main issues here are how long will Iran suspend its enrichment for? Iran wants to do it only for 10 years. Trump was insisting for 20, and he was willing to agree to even 15, but Iran is unwilling to agree to 15-year suspension. The second big issue is what is to be done with the nuclear material. Iran has 440 kilos of highly enriched uranium, which is enriched to 60%, almost to bomb grade. What will be done with this? Some information has been leaked. Apparently, half would be sent out of Iran, and the other half would be diluted down to whatever 3.5% or whatever is required for medical purposes and nuclear energy purposes. More or less the Obama deal. But here lies the problem. Who will inspect it? Who will be the inspectors? This is the third big issue. Where will the material which is to be sent out be sent? Who is going to monitor the dilution? And what will happen to the other nuclear material which is not purified to 60%, which is an unknown quantity? We don't know where it is exactly. That is, Iran has material which is enriched up to 20% and also some which is between 20 and 60%. And what will be the precise amount to which Iran will be allowed to enrich? Also, what will be the fate of Iran's nuclear sites? Will they be shut down? How will they be inspected? And no matter what Israel and the United States do, they cannot eliminate the nuclear know how that Iran's establishment and nuclear scientists already have. Iran already has hundreds, thousands of high speed centrifuges which can spin at supersonic speeds. And what if Iran is building or has already built some secret nuclear sites? Because even in the past, Iran had been building sites which neither the US nor Israel knew about. In fact, these sites were revealed by the IAEA inspectors, which makes Iran unlikely to rely upon them because they publicly published information about Iran's scientists, its nuclear material location, nuclear facilities, which Israel and the US used for later bombing and targeting Iran. So, because trust is so low and because Iran has repeatedly experienced bombings during nuclear negotiations with the US and the tearing up of a previous deal, it is likely that whatever deal is arrived would only be short term and transactional. Remember, Mujtaba Khamenei lost his father, his sister, wife, son, and was himself brutally mutilated by the same Israeli American bombing. That is, he was mutilated and his relatives were killed by the same people he's negotiating with. So, because they have been repeatedly betrayed, maybe Iran also will adopt the same attitude, do a short term deal in order to get some relief, and then go back to either enriching nuclear material or making a bomb. Because, as I had explained in a previous video, we have entered the third nuclear age. Countries have realized that not having nuclear weapons or giving up your nuclear weapons invites attack. And if you have a nuclear weapon, then you are safe. Remember, Libya and Ukraine and Iraq gave up their nuclear weapons and were yet attacked. And Iran, which promised not to develop weapons and remained a threshold state, was also attacked. The only country which survived attack was nuclear North Korea. So it appears going nuclear gives you safety. And hence, I foresee a race to a nuclear weapon by threshold nuclear states. That is, those states which have the technology, have the material, and feel threatened in some way are all going to make a dash for nuclear weapons. And possibly this race is going to be led by Iran itself. Now, will Israel and the United States allow that? Unlikely. And so you're going to see prolonged conflict. And now that Iran knows that its real weapon right now is Hormuz, that it can close it at the drop of a hat, you are going to see prolonged uncertainty and prolonged instability in the Middle East, not just because of this Persian Gulf problem, but also because Israel is so expansionist. That is, as I've explained in my previous videos, it is because of the Israel lobby, the American Jewish lobby, which funds American politicians, everybody from the House and the Senate up to the president himself. As I've explained in the past, that is a single family, that's the Adelson family, this Jewish family, gave Trump $250 million for this 2024 election. And they had given him money even the previous one. Others too have been giving similar funds. That is the Singer family, the Tish family, individuals such as Bloomberg, individuals such as Andreessen, Peter Thiel, and organizations such as APEC. They have not just been funding Trump, but they have funded previous presidents, including Biden. Biden, in fact, received far more money than Trump over his career. He started receiving money right from the 1970s when he was a senator down to the time he was president. And hence, they feel that they must listen to these funders and do Israel's bidding and keep subsidizing Israel. In fact, the US has funded the entire bombing campaign of Gaza, providing $22 billion in weapons and financial aid to Israel. They also subsidized expansion in the West Bank settlements, illegal settlements in the West Bank. Now it's possible that Trump might finally try to restrict or restrain Israel because the US does have the leverage, as I've explained, and he might be feeling the heat from his own supporters, many of whom in the MAGA base have turned against Israel. And in fact, the general public opinion in the United States has also turned against Israel. Trump is also deeply worried about the coming midterms. But remember, Netanyahu faces his own pressures. After all, there is a general election in October in Israel itself. And so he's under pressure also from the aggressive public of Israel and from these aggressive opposition politicians. And remember, Netanyahu himself had made it his career's goal, his lifelong goal, to destroy Iran. So keep watching. And if you like this analysis, please subscribe to the channel, share, and send me your comments. Until next time, Daswadanya.